Hi, everyone. I want to thank you for being here. Hi, everyone in Zoom land. My talk for today is continuing the theme of realizing our strength. I've spoken on this topic of strength many times over the years here. I've explained strength can be found by focusing our thoughts and projecting our will to make things happen, the secret. And how real strength can be found in surrender. Surrender of our egos, surrender to love, surrendering to God. So when thinking about this topic, I kind of marveled at how strength can be found in focused activity and equally in passive receptivity. I realized that if I was going to reach my audience with this topic, I would need to address it like a prescription for each person, wherever they might be in the soul's journey to self-actualization. We're all in a different place, and the strength we manifest is dependent on where we're at and what we need. So, in thinking about this, the idea of the active and the passive and the journey of the soul, 3 books immediately jumped out to mind. The first is called The 7 Valleys. It was first written about by the Sufi Attar in his Conference of the Birds, and later by Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, in his book, The 7 Valleys. I'll draw upon these works in their 7 stages during my talk. The second book might be more known by contemporary folks, The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was heavily inspired by Carl Jung, who's a love of mine. Jung was the groundbreaking psychologist and Gnostic who worked on theories such as the shadow, synchronicity, archetypes, and the collective unconscious. Jung explained that the unconscious operates in the realm of symbols, and meanings take time to be deciphered and understood consciously. That too will come into play, especially with this next book, heavily based on symbol. My third and last book for drawing from in this talk will actually be my blueprint, the Book of Thoth. Thoth, some might accidentally pronounce it as Thoth or Toth. Thoth is an Egyptian god of all knowledge and wisdom. The name the Book of Thoth has been applied to numerous texts, thousands, but one of which is referred to a silent book of wisdom. And it has 22 depictions, and that's it. It's a silent book. So understanding how to read was not required. It has 22 depictions showing the journey and the evolution of the soul. These depictions are numbered 0 through 21. They were originally painted on stone in the hallway of truth as 22 illustrations, 11 active archetypes facing 11 receptive archetypes down a hallway, forming kind of like a storyboard circle. And framed by pillars which led to a room where a heart was weighed against the feather of truth. This was done during the soul soon after death. It journeyed through the hole of truth, the hole of Mat, and was met by Anubis, and that classic depiction, the scale and the heart and the feather. And, you'd pretty much decided if your heart was as light as truth, or if the crocodile was going to get a snack. I just realized I skipped a whole bunch about the hero's journey. So an initiate would give a confession before each of these murals that they have acted in alignment with the truth that was portrayed. There's even speculation that Moses, who was trained by Egyptian priests, found inspiration from this when he wrote the commandments. They share themes like, I have not stolen, I have not slain men or women, I have not lied, etc. For those that have not spotted the clues yet, you might know these archetypal depictions by a more common name, the major arcana of the tarot. I will use the major arcana now as it was originally intended, as a depiction of the soul's journey of evolution, mentioning the strengths realized at each step and pointing out along the way the above-mentioned book's stages where appropriate. And I'm going to pay for an act of stupidity. One moment, please. Hi, I'm back. Just another thought on Joseph Campbell. For Jung, the creative process is one which the contents of the unconscious mind are brought to light in order to become fully conscious and self-actualized. Here enters storytelling and myth-making, which capture the truth of a deep psychological process. Campbell's hero's journey blueprints the stories of myth and legends, human evolution, and the will to achieve something extraordinary. An example of this from ancient mythology is the story of Hercules, a god that lost awareness of his godhood and, as a man, undertook the journey to reclaim his inheritance as a god. The parallels are obvious. All right. Modern legends include such famous names as Dorothy, Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, and Neo. So, now skipping ahead past my explanation of thought, I come to using the major arcana as the major magic, as the skeleton of the storyboard, of which I will impose the valleys of this journey of the soul, and in the process of each step, be able to look at the strength that is required at that step. So, of course, with the start of the journey comes the start of every of the stages from the different books. So we begin with the 11 active archetypes as opposed to the 11 receptive archetypes that are facing on the other side of the wall. And we begin the hero's journey with Act 1, the departure. And this is the beginning of the adventure. It's also the first valley. The first valley is searching. The seeker must cleanse his heart and search for a higher path. So, archetype 0 is called the empty one. This is an archetype that portrays innocence and being completely unconditioned. There is no expectation. There is just the love of a child that dances like no one is watching. It is fearless. The strengths come through and fearlessly undertaking creative endeavors, expressing the flow of life without concern, judgment, opinion, or what anyone else might think. It is genuine love and calls to mind what Jesus said as to enter as a child into the kingdom of God, where love alone is all it takes that draws you to the true source. No intellect required. The next step, this is, I should say, of the empty one, is the portrayal of an innocent soul stepping off the top ledge of a mountain into his journey below. The next archetype is called the Magi. Here the soul develops conscious awareness. An awareness of thoughts and frequencies. The strengths here come with an understanding of thought. This is the awareness of the higher self and the ability to use focused thought to manifest reality, something we reinforce every week. This is the higher self active force. I'm not going to get hung up on gender. Each soul responds to the yin and the yang of the force, the active and the receptive. The complement to the Magi, to the priest, if you will, is the high priestess. Here is the receptive higher self, while the active self speaks and acts and projects energy. The high priestess sits in silence, aware, knowing, intuitive. This is where the soul develops its subconscious and the wisdom of the collective unconscious. Strengths would include intuition, understanding wisdom and great truth, knowledge that we are all connected as one consciousness in God. The next step is the Empress. This is the earthly counterpart to the high priestess. Here the soul learns the strength of love, nurturing, bounty, infinite bounty, and being fruitful. All of these nurturing, loving, motherly qualities are a tremendous strength. The complement to the Empress is the Emperor. Now, this is the earthly counterpart to the Magi. Here, the soul learns the strength of dominion, being a knowledgeable authority, an architect directing the will to create from the earth. So, this is your classic mansplainer, explains everything, sets up the rules, encompassing knowledge and a father figure. At this point in the hero's journey, we meet the mentor. A mentor appears that can give advice, wisdom, information, or items that ready the the hero for the journey ahead. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. This is your classic Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi moment. And that takes us to, within this section of the hero's journey, the guide archetype. Here the soul undertakes guidance to help on the journey. The soul gains strength by understanding the world is much larger than it understood and is prepared for the future journey. You know, this is also the meeting of Morpheus. And having explained that there is a world that transpires behind the world that appears. There's a hand that moves the pen, and that we can peel back the curtain and see what was formerly unseen, experience it, if we learn how to grow a new antenna. At this point in the journey, we come to crossing the threshold. The hero leaves the ordinary world for the first time and crosses the threshold into adventure. This is a point of no return. And we come to the archetype, the lover. This is actually one of the first tests of initiation. This is the time the soul must decide, where does its heart and its treasure lie? Sorry, I lost my place. In a world that through it gained strength, it can either choose to maintain dominion in this world or give up the entire idea of all that it has known to seek greater mysterious understandings. The two worlds are incompatible. Either you stick to this manifest world and its truths, or you peek behind the curtain. And coming behind the curtain, the world will never seem the same again. Even if you walk in the manifest, you'll see it entirely differently. And once a choice is made to move on, you can decide the lessons and you can decide the speed of your growth, but it's a one-way ticket. A Course in Miracles explains this. So we come to Act 2 in the hero's journey, initiation. There's actually several, but making the choice to commit to the real and to evolve the soul is the crossing of a threshold that unfolds an entirely new future. So in this point in the hero's journey, we come across tests, alliances, and enemies. The hero learns the rules of the new world and endures tests, meet friends, and faces enemies. You meet people who are able to offer advice, or those that reflect areas of yourself that you have to work on. We begin with the next archetype, the Charioteer. There is, at times, I think anyone would agree, a struggle to keep thoughts and emotions which can act like wild horses, to keep them in check and in balance, to pull the chariot like a unified team, not shooting off in opposite directions. Strength is also needed to embrace and balance this polarity of opposites. Examples would be the male and the female, mind and emotion, constrictive and expansive frequencies. Next archetype is truth and justice. This is the strength to overcome the last of conditioning and self-deception. To truly know and accept yourself as you are, without judgment. Here we also understand karmic balance and cause and effect. All of these truths are kept by this card. Excuse me, archetype. I am so stuck on that word. Some people think the entire wisdom of the book is meant to be cards and that it couldn't possibly be Egyptian because paper didn't exist back then. How clever of them. Yeah, I guess if you don't have paper, you can't portray anything. There's no history of carving or painting. So the next step is called the Hermit. This is strength to look within and find inside the kingdom of God, to be that radiant force that shines as an example for others, to find within the light. Once you've embraced the darkness, it turns to light. That darkness was a part of you. It was a part of your energy. You don't judge it. You recognize it as one of the frequencies of God, because nothing exists outside of God, and we're only here as aspects of God. So that dark energy becomes bright energy, and we become very bright, radiant. And we can, just by being, no need to instruct and act all wise, just radiate. And it's a guide. Next, the wheel of life. Here we gain strength from understanding that life is a series of cycles. We grow, face adversity, and learn from it, one way or the other. Each time we complete a cycle, we carve a groove deeper in our evolutionary understanding. There is strength also in staying balanced when in times of misery or jubilation, because this too will change as the wheel spins. The last archetype in the active principles is strength, literal. This is taking the animal self and instead of conquering it, transforming it into a majestic king of beasts, a great lion that becomes regal, and the crown jewelry is placed over the third eye of the animal, and it is the vehicle we ride. It does not ride us. True strength. Right? The id, the ego, conditionings, pride, the list, of course, is legion. So now we come to the 11 receptive archetypes. And this is where it gets more interesting, so everybody wake up. Okay. We enter the second valley. This is love's fire. Love burns away intellect, can cause pain, madness, and single-minded pursuit. The fire of love burns away the material self, revealing the world of the spirit. This is the red pill moment. The term red pill has become cliche now. Anyone who's, on a journey of awakening considers the red pill. But if you think about what the red pill is in the movie, that's when things start going upside down. All right? You start seeing things you never saw before that other people don't see. You realize a much larger world. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but it's not a story. Weird stuff is real. So, that moment you go through the looking glass, the mirror, you step out of what is reflected into the reflector, the astral. And the next archetype kind of portrays that. The flipped man. I'm taking some liberties with these names because honestly, I'm not here to teach tarot or the valleys or the meanings of the archetypes. I'm using it as a skeleton to show the journey of the soul and speak of the strengths that are required at each step. So I call it the flipped man. And this is where your world is turned upside down. You crossed the threshold, you peeled back the curtain, you entered a new world. Now you see them, they see you. They always saw you, but that's a different story. You're forced to see the world from a new perspective. Being turned upside down, coins fall from your pockets. And the new perspective, while intimidating and somewhat freezing you in place, gives you tremendous insight from a new perspective, an understanding a little bit of how the hand moves the pen. This takes us to transition. Things you thought you were, like your prior beliefs of who you were and what you projected, and your ego. These are shed like a dead body. Realizing it is not you. Sometimes when going through this stage, clients will report to their therapists that they're having dreams of death. They see themselves lying dead. This is the ego's attempt to say its death is your death. Neat trick if it can pull it off. But at this point, you have some wisdom. And as long as you don't identify with that rusty suit of armor, the ego is shed. And every death is a transition. This takes us to the process of alchemy. Here, we are tempered like steel in fire, pounded, mixed, merged. We are collecting the splinters of our shattered soul and unifying them. This is also the unification of opposites within us. We are in the process here of being constantly challenged and mixed and burned and crushed and distilled and then remerged until you have the classic rebus, the human with two heads and the solar force and the lunar force married. It's also portrayed as a woman or angel stepping both in water and on land as it does its alchemical mixing and pouring. And this is a representation of having a foot in each world and the challenges of having a foot in each world. Just as a brief aside, as an example, I remember speaking to an interesting person, and I had just come from what could have been a very dangerous car accident at high speed. And I said to them, "What would you say if I died?" And you know, in that moment, without thinking that you can get insight or a flash from where someone's coming from, they said, I'd go, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, wow, okay, that gives me a lot. Take from it what you will. That's not the kind of thing you can just make up and sound cool. I mean, it just came right out. And I'm like, okay. So, a foot in each world. Very, very difficult. If you've ever meditated and then had the doorbell ring, the phone ring, the dog bark, you know a foot in each world. So next in the hero's journey is the approach. The initial plan to take on the central conflict begins, but setbacks occur and the hero must try a new approach or adopt new ideas or ways of thinking. This is where, again, self-doubt and fear can arise as another threshold must be crossed. And that brings us to the archetype, the adversary. This is a monstrous guardian that blocks every initiate's path. And like the huge Balrog in Lord of the Rings, rises like a monster to stop us in our evolution. This turns out to be a manifestation of our unworthiness, our unlovability, our addictions, alcohol, sex, anger. These are manifest in our judgment creating this monster. And the conquering of it is not by force, it's by awareness. You summon the demons before you, and you see them as a part of you, and you accept them and respect them for where they're at, and your plan for how they will be assimilated, returned. That monster is you, your subconscious, showing you your judgment on yourself. Your passage happens when you accept who you are. You know where your limitations are. You follow the light and strive to ever grow. So this takes us to the major ordeal, right? That was just the boss fight. This is the dark night of the soul. This is serious business. No joke, this is where the hero hits rock bottom. They thought they kept hitting rock bottom, but this is rock bottom. They feel as though they are in a dark end of their days where moving on seems impossible and that they feel torn to pieces. Nothing of who they thought they were exists. They are considering the sweet release. It is a tempting moment that we all face in times of desperation, and a whole new strength is required. One of which is, all right, even if my dreams are dashed, I'll never be what I hope to be, I see my limitations, I can still serve to help someone else. Tell them my mistakes, give them a better shot. that in itself is grace. And with grace, grace will eventually be shown. But I get ahead of myself. But if you are attached to being thought of in a certain way or proud of any given thing, this is the moment it's shown to be illusion to you and ripped into pieces and just fluttering to the ground. And that's a moment of awakening we need, because that was not real. How can we get better until we recognize the problem? And sometimes, as Marianne Williamson says, until both knees hit the ground completely, you're only playing at life. But nervous breakdowns are highly underrated forms of spiritual evolution. So, now we come to the ordeal, and the archetype I call war. This is the holy war, jihad. But the jihad, is within ourselves. And suddenly I'm going to be talking a whole lot faster. Everything that is not in alignment in our lives is shattered as a new current begins coursing through us. A new God current comes through like a bolt of lightning. And self-image and other untruths are flayed away. This is where we come to reward. After surviving the ordeal, the hero seizes the reward they've earned that allows them to take on their biggest challenge yet. And here we enter the third valley, Gnosis. The seeker begins to understand the mysteries contained within God's revelation and finds wisdom in all things, including when faced with pain and hardship. This takes us to the star. After losing hope and waiting for rescue from the war within, mercy and grace arrives. This is the meeting of the higher self, a moment when you step out of time. It just stops, and you're not even breathing. And it can go for minutes, and it doesn't matter. And you feel a total resonation of the frequency that you always felt you were, and the utmost love and acceptance. And untrained, you would think that's God. No, that's just the pure, unblemished frequency of you. Far greater than that is God. So now we come to the fourth valley, unity. The seeker now seeks the attributes of God in all created things. The seeker is detached from earthly things, is not concerned with his own self, his reputation, what people think. Instead, he praises God for all of creation. This takes us to the archetype, the moon. Just like with moonlight, the path forward isn't clear, but we have to trust our sense of direction, that we're going the basic way. No guide tells us this is the next step you must take. The responsibility is on us. We accept and we glean information from what comes from our subconscious. Again, a reference to the moon. This is the moment of gaining the silver key of heaven. If you look on the crest of the papacy in the Roman Catholic Church, you'll see below a silver and a gold key. Those are the keys of St. Peter that get you into heaven. The silver key is the key. Silver is truth, right? That's why the Lone Ranger fires silver bullets. They're true, right? It doesn't rust. So you've gained a refinement of silver level. That means you're not the radiant master, but you're true. The third act, the return. This is the road back. The hero sees the light at the end of the tunnel, but must face even more tests and challenges. This takes us to the fifth valley, contentment. The seeker becomes independent of all worldly things. He or she may look poor, doesn't have to be. Poor has nothing to do with spirituality, or that they're subjected to suffering. But they are endowed with wealth and power from the spiritual worlds and are inwardly content. All right. The archetype here is the sun. This is joy. This is love. And this is where the golden key is attained. This is mastery, the philosopher's stone. Anything that touches this gold will slowly transform to be gold as well, as long as it has an ounce of gold within itself to start. Next, in the hero's journey, the resurrection. The hero faces a final test, using everything they've learned to take on a battle that transcends their individual quest, and with its consequences being far-reaching, possibly for entire communities or the evolution of humanity itself. This is the projection of a master that changes world consciousness. Next archetype is judgment. This is the rebirth with a clear mission for a new age. A new time requires a new age, a new paradigm. Old power structures fall, and they hang on every last bit of the way, but the new word is being spoken. This brings us to the return. The hero brings their knowledge back to the ordinary world. There's a realization that when you've changed, so does your reality. And this is the last valley. True poverty and absolute nothingness. Again, poverty not having to do with rich, poor. Poverty in that if there is no self, there is no ownership. What you thought was self that's left after all the fire and the crushing and the embracing is the frequency of God. You recognize that you're the drop, it's the ocean's the drop's the ocean. You lose an awareness of self. I mean, the idea of losing self sounds like hell to a person that isn't ready. But to a master, you become an aspect of God. You gain consciousness of God. That's another lecture, if you ever still want to invite me back. This is the furthermost state the mystic can reach. It's the state of annihilation of self in God. But the essence of God's self and the mystic self remain vaguely distinct in unity, in contrast to the complete annihilation in God that's common in other traditions. And the last numbered card, I did it again, archetype, is the aeon, the age, the new age. The mission here is complete, and I'll cut the rest of it because you can figure out its roll credits. But there is still one last step, the 0 card. The circle completes, and it's time to take the empty one's path home and complete the circle. But while you left the collective unconscious as an innocent, loving child, you return to the ocean of God as a self-actualized, loving co-creator. Thank you. In the past, I had done lectures that required tremendous research, and everyone complimented me on the meditation. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. This is going to be a very straightforward meditation. Close your eyes, relax, clear your mind, be at peace. Be aware of the tension in your face. Tense it and relax it. In your shoulders, in your chest. Be aware of your breathing. And as you become aware, your breathing will naturally slow. Tense and release your hands, your legs, your toes. And just breathe in the strength of one or two of the archetypes that resonated with you. In through the nose and out through the mouth. These are just suggestions if you wish to breathe in this strength. Feel that at each step you have acquired deep wisdom and understanding and have mastered polarities and when to use them and when to and how to stay balanced, centered in thought, in emotion, in expectation, in whatever cycle you are going through, in the face of challenges, and balanced in victory. Take in a few more deep breaths. And if you'd like, begin to bring your consciousness back to this room. Come on back. There you are. Hi. So, I think the next part is the prayer of protection. If you'll join me, please. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. Power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.